Hello, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. We're reading Beowulf. This is an epic poem. We're on part 7 of 8 parts that we've been reading together. This is translated by Burton Raphael. What an exciting story, huh? Beowulf and his men just got back to their homeland. Hillick, his uncle, he was very happy to see him. There's riches being shared. From Horgarth, where he killed Grendel and his mother, and everything is looking good, except I warned you last time. He's about to face another monster, right? So let's read a little bit here, right? Afterwards, in the time when Hilgrith was dead, and Hedred his son, who ruled the Geats after his father had followed him into darkness. So if you remember, Hilglick and he had a son, and they're both died, killed in battle with the Swedes. Remember, they're always fighting each other, these Norsemen, who smashed his shield, cut through the soldiers surrounding their king, and then, when Hyg's one son was gone, Beowulf ruled Geatland. Let's hear it for Beowulf, right? The nephew. Took the throne he'd refused once, and he held it long and well. And he was old with years and wisdom, 50 winters, a king, when a dragon awoke from its darkness and dreams and brought terror to his people. The beast had slept in a huge stone tower with a hidden path beneath, and a man stumbled on the entrance, went in, discovered the ancient treasure, the pagan jewels and gold that the dragon had been guarding, and dazzled and greedy, he stole a gem-studded cup and fled. But now the dragon hid nothing, neither the theft nor itself. It swept through the darkness, and all Geatland knew its anger. Oh. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Does it remind you of something? Ladies and gentlemen, if you read J.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, the trilogy, and then The Hobbit separately, this is exactly what happens to wake up old Smaug, the dragon, right? Somebody takes something, and we're not going to tell you that story unless you read it yourself. And Tolkien is not to be chastised for taking ideas from Beowulf, but he should be complimented for taking ideas from this beautiful epic story. Let's continue, because the dragon has awoken because somebody stole one of the pieces of his treasure. That's what happens when you steal. But the thief had not come to steal. He stole, and he roused the dragon, not from a desire, but need. He was someone's slave, and had been beaten by his masters. And he had run from all men's sight, but there was no place to hide. And then he found the hidden path, and so he used it. And once inside, seeing the sleeping beast, staring at it, yawned and stretched, not wanting to wake it, because he was terror-struck, but he turned and ran for his life, taking the jeweled cup. So this was a person, right? Had been someone's slave. Someone's slave. When we read Civil Disobedience, you'll see that Henry David Thoreau was against slavery. So slavery's been around a long time. Still is in certain countries. Horrible, horrible. The tower where the dragon lived was heaped high with hidden treasure, and it was stored there years before by the last survivor of a noble race. Ancient riches left in the darkness as the end of the dynasty came. Death had taken them one by one, and the warrior who watched over all that remained mourned their fate, expecting soon the same for himself, knowing that the gold and the jewels that he had guarded so long could not bring him pleasure much longer. So he brought the precious cups, the armor, the ancient swords, to a stone tower built near the sea below a cliff. And he sealed the fortress with no windows, no doors, waves and waves in front of it, rocks behind it. Kind of like a lighthouse, That's what I'm imagining. And then he spoke. Take these treasures, earth, now that no one living can enjoy them. They are yours. In the beginning, allow them to return. War and terror have swept away my people and shut their eyes to delight and to living. Close the door to all gladness. What did that? War and terror. No one is left to lift these swords, polish these jeweled cups. No one leads, no one follows. These hammered helmets, worked with gold, will tarnish, crack, and the hands that could clean and polish them are still forever. And these mail shirts, worn in battle once while swords crashed and blades bit into the shields of men, they're going to rust away like the warriors who owned them. None of these treasures will travel to distant lands following their lords. The harp's bright song, the hawk crossing through the hall, on swift wings the stallion tramping in the courtyard, they're all gone. Creatures of every kind, and their masters hurled to the grave. What a sad song, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? He's the last of his kind and takes the treasures and throws them into this tower. And so he spoke sadly of those long dead and lived from day to day, joyless, until at last death touched his heart and took him too. And a stalker in the night, a flaming dragon, found that treasure unguarded. He whom men fear came flying through the darkness, wrapped in fire, seeking caves and stone-split ruins, but finding gold. And then it stayed, buried itself with heathen silver and jewels that it could neither use nor ever abandon. So mankind's enemy, this mighty beast, slept in those stone walls for hundreds of years, until a runaway slave roused it, stole a jeweled cup, and brought his master's forgiveness, begged for mercy, and was pardoned when his delighted lord took the present. So he takes the cup back to his lord, begs forgiveness and mercy. He turned it in his hands and stared at the ancient carvings. That's his master, right? He's a slave. And the cup brought peace to the slave. Pleased his master, but it stirred the dragon's anger. It turned, hunting the thieves' tracks, and found them, saw where its visitor had come and gone. He survived, had come close enough to touch its scaly head, and yet lived. He's talking about the slave who stole the cup, right? The man stole the cup. He came close enough to touch him, and he lived. Because, why? The dragon was sleeping. As it lifted its carnivorous jaws. Carnivorous? What's carnivorous, ladies and gentlemen? You know what carnivorous is, right? Through the grace of Almighty God and a pair of quiet, quick-moving feet. The dragon followed his steps, anxious to find the man who had robbed it of silver and sleep. It circled around and around the tower, determined to catch him, but could not. He had run too fast, and the wilderness was empty. The beast went back to its treasure, planning a bloody revenge, and found what was missing. Can you imagine him trying to figure out what's missing in that heap of gold, silver? But he did. He saw what thieving hands had stolen, and then it crouched on the stones, counting off the hours till the Almighty's candle went out. What is that? That's the sun setting. Evening came, and wild with anger, the dragon, it could fly burning across the land, killing and destroying with its breath. So he's much more effective in the dark, right? Because he's got, what? Fire from his breath. Then the sun was gone, and its heart was glad. Its heart, that's a pronoun. The dragon's heart was glad, glowing with rage. The dragon left the tower, impatient to repay its enemies. The people suffered. Everyone lived in terror. But when Beowulf had learned of their trouble, his fate was worse and came quickly. What do you call this, ladies and gentlemen? When Beowulf learned of their trouble, whose trouble? The people, his people's trouble, his fate was worse and came quickly. Okay, his fate. Whose fate? Well, this is an interesting question because the pronoun his. Is it Beowulf? I think it's Beowulf, so it's foreshadowing. Or if you think his is the dragon, well, I don't think it is. But I think even if it is the dragon, this is called, you remember? Foreshadowing, right? Somebody's going to die. The dragon or Beowulf, right? Somebody's going to die. Chapter 33. Vomiting fire and smoke, the dragon burned down their homes, and they watched in horror as the flames rose up. The angry monster meant to leave nothing alive, and the signs of its anger flickered and glowed in the darkness, visible for miles. Tokens of its hate and its cruelty spread like a warning to the Geats, who had broken its rest. And then it hurried back to its tower, to its hidden treasure before dawn could come. It had wrapped its flames around the Geats. Now it trusted in stone walls and its strength to protect it. So he goes and he retires to his lair, the dragon's lair, right? But they would not come. What's they? What's they? They would not. They would not what? Protect it, right? Protect it. They would not protect the dragon. Because then they came to Beowulf, their king, and announced that his hall, his throne, the best of buildings had melted away in the dragon's burning breath. Their words brought misery. Don't forget, Beowulf's been the king for 50 years, right? Beowulf's sorrow beat at his heart, and he accused himself of breaking God's law. You see what a guy this is? He's accusing himself. This is important, of breaking. I must have done something wrong. You see what I'm saying? This is very important in this poem. Of bringing the Almighty's anger down on his people. Reproach pounded in his breast, gloomy and dark, and the world seemed a different place. But the hall was gone. The dragon's molten breath had licked across it and burned it to ashes. Can you imagine the devastation of this dragon? Near the shore that it had guarded, the Geats deserved revenge. Beowulf, their leader and lord, began to plan it, and he ordered a battle shield shaped of iron, knowing that wood would be useless. Why? The dragon breathes fire. And knowing that wood would be useless, that no hidden linden shield could help him, protect him in the flaming heat of the beast's breath. That noble prince would end his days on earth soon, and would leave this brief life. But he would take the dragon with him, tear it from the heaped-up treasure that it had guarded so long. What do you call this? What do you call this? Foreshadowing. Read it again. That noble prince would end his days on earth soon, and would leave this brief life, but would take the dragon with him. So this is, to me, the hymn, right? This prince would end his days on earth. That's Beowulf. And he would go it alone, scorning to lead soldiers against such an enemy. He's going to have to do it himself again, just like he did Grendel and Grendel's mom. He saw nothing to fear. He saw nothing to fear. Against worse odds, he had survived and had been victorious in harsher battles, beginning in Herat, Hrothgar's unlucky hall. He had killed Grendel and his mother and swept that murdering tribe away. And he'd fought in Hildebrand's war with the Frisians, and he fought at his lord's side till his sword reached out and drank Hildebrand's blood, till the blade swung in the rush of battle and killed the Geats' great king. But then Beowulf escaped, and he broke through Phrygian shields and swam on freedom, saving 30 sets of armor from the scavenging Franks, river people who robbed the dead as they floated by. So this is explaining how he got not only to be king, but what a fierce fighter this guy is, right? Beowulf offered them only his sword and ended so many jackal lives that the few who were able skulked silently home. Oh, I love the writing. Skulked silently home, glad to leave him. And so Beowulf swam sadly back to Geatland, almost the only warrior of a foolish war. Hilget's widow brought him the crown and offered him the kingdom, not trusting Hendred, her son, and Hilget's to beat off foreign invaders. But Beowulf refused to rule when his lord's own son was alive, and the leaderless Geats could choose a rightful king. And he gave Hendred all of his support, offering an open heart where Hilget's young son could see wisdom that he lacked himself. So his mom bypasses her son for Beowulf. He refuses the kingdom. And here he's saying, you're reading that the narrator's telling us that Beowulf was a pretty smart guy. Warmth and goodwill were what Beowulf brought his new king. But Swedish exiles came, seeking protection, and they were rebels against Onelia. Remember, genealogy is very important to these people. So the narrator's giving us a background before Beowulf goes to fight the dragon. Hedalfain's son-in-law and the best ring giver his people had ever known. And Onelia came too, a mighty king, and he marched on Geatland with a huge army. Hendred had given his word, and now he gave his life, shielding the Swedish strangers. Onelia wanted nothing more, and when Hendred had fallen, that famous warrior went back to Sweden. Let Beowulf rule. So this is the guy who came in. Hendred had given his word, and now he gave his life, shielding the Swedish strangers. Swedish came in. He backed the Swedes. He lost his life. That's all this guy wanted, Onelia and Onela, and Beowulf will rule. But Beowulf remembered how his king had been killed. And as soon as he could, he lent the last of the Swedish rebels soldiers and gold, right? He lent the last of the Swedish soldiers and gold and helped him to a bitter battle across the wide sea where victory and revenge and the Swedish throne were won. So Beowulf remembers how his own king was killed and goes across, the ocean to kill the Swedes. You see how these people just fight? Onela was slain. So Ethro's son survived, no matter what dangers he met. This is a prelude to tell you that even though he's going to fight the dragon, and we know he's killed Grendel and Grendel's mother, that this guy is a warrior, and he survived lots of different battles and so on. What dangers he met, what battles he fought, brave, and forever triumph until the day that fate sent him to the dragon and sent him death. Foreshadowing. A dozen warriors, this is a sad story. A dozen warriors walked with their angry king, and when he was brought to the beast, Beowulf knew by then what had woken the monster and enraged it. The cup had come to him, traveled from dragon to slave to master to king, and the slave was their guide, and he had begun the Geats' affliction. So the slave was guiding them to where the monster was, right? And the slave was their guide. And now, afraid of both beast and men, who was afraid of both beast and men, the slave, right? He was forced to lead them to the monster's hidden home. He showed them the huge stones set deep in the ground, with the sea beating on the rocks close by. And Beowulf stared and listened to the stories of the gold and riches that were heaped inside. Hidden but wakeful now, the dragon waited, ready to greet him. Gold and hammered armor have been buried in a pleasanter places. The battle-brave king, who's that? That's Beowulf, rested on the shore, while his soldiers wished him well and urged him on. But Beowulf's heart was heavy. His soul sensed how close fate had come, felt something, not fear, but knowledge of old age. This is a very interesting sentence, right? He's not afraid. He's just old. His armor was strong, but his arm hung like his heart. Body and soul might part here, and his blood might be spilled, his spirit torn from his flesh. And then he spoke. My early years were full of war, and I survived it all. I can remember everything. I was 7 years old when Hethrol opened his home and his heart for me, and when my king and lord took me from my father and kept me and taught me and gave me gold and pleasure, glad that I sat at his knee. And he never loved me less than any of his sons. Herbald, the oldest, Hythen or Hilgeth, my lord. Herbald died in a horrible death and killed while hunting. And Hythen, his brother, stretched his horn-tipped bow, sent an arrow flying, but missed the mark and hit Herbald instead, and found him with a bloody point and pierced him through. The crime was great, and the guilt was plain, but nothing could be done, so no vengeance and no death to repay that death, no punishment, nothing. So there was an accident, a hunting accident. So with the graybeard whose son sins against the king and is hanged, he stands watching his child swing on the gallows, lamenting helpless while his flesh and blood hangs for ravens to pluck. He can raise his voice in sorrow, but revenge is impossible. And every morning he remembers how his son died and despairs. No son to come matters, no future heir to a father forced to live through such misery. So he lost all his sons, right? The place where the sun once dwelled, where death compelled him to journey away, is a windy wasteland, empty, cheerless. The childless father shudders, seeing it. And so riders and ridden sleep in the ground, pleasure is gone. The harp is silent, and hope is forgot. You see, this is a sad tale. Took me from my father and kept me, so who's that? Old Hethrod opened up his home. So he adopted Beowulf, right? He had sons. 3. This guy, or Heldrick, this guy, and Herbald died a horrible death, and he was killed while hunting. So this guy, Herbald, right, was shot by Hyson, his brother. By mistake, missed the mark and hit Herbald instead and found him with a bloody point, right? He's done. And this is this guy, Herbald, looking is the oldest, but this is the king, the former king, right? It's a sad story. It's a sad story. So the graybeard whose son sins against the king and is hanged. They hung the guy, right? And so now he's childless. And then crying his sorrow, he crawls to his bed. The world and his home hurt him with their emptiness. And so it seemed to Hethrol, right? Think about this. Go back a second. Hethrol, right? That's the guy who was the father. He had 3 sons, correct? This is Hethrol here, right? Am I right? Hethrol? 3 sons, one kills the other in hunting, right? Hyacinth or Hilrek, my lord. Hilrek is left, childless. And so it seemed to Hethrol when Herbald was dead and his heart swelled with grief, the murderer lived, and he felt no love for him now, but nothing could help. Word nor hand nor sharp blade, war nor hate battle or blood or law, the pain could find no relief. He could only live with the pain and leave grief and life together, right? And he'd gone to his grave. Hyacinth and Hilgeth, his sons, inherited everything. And then there was war between the Geats and the Swedes. This is what we alluded to earlier, right? Bitter battles carried across the broad sea, and when mighty Hethrel slept and Orthgo's sons thought Sweden could safely attack and saw no use to pretending friendship, but raided and burned, and near old Ringsburg slaughtered the Geeks with their thieving swords, my people repaid them, death for death, battle for battle, though one of the brothers brought that revenge with his life. Eystein, king of the Geats, was killed by a Swedish sword. And when dawn came, the slayer was slain, and Hilgeth's soldiers avenged everything with the edge of their blades. This is a long win before he goes to battle the dragon, because why? The narrator's telling us what Beowulf said. This is Beowulf. Why is Beowulf reciting all this? Why do you think? Standing there where the dragon is sitting quietly, waiting. Why is he reciting all this? He's reciting all this because this is part of the oral tradition. If you haven't guessed it yet, none of this stuff was written down yet. The epic poem was written, Beowulf. But when they were alive like this, they would tell these stories. In the mead hall, they would repeat the stories. We've heard this story sometimes, some of it. And what he's doing now is he's telling the men before he goes to fight the dragon, so they don't forget. So they don't forget. Efgar caught the Swedish king and cracked his helmet and split his skull and dropped him, pale and bleeding to the ground, and then put him to death with a swift stroke, shouting his joy. The gifts that Hilgeth gave me and the land that I earned with my sword as fate allowed, he never needed Danes or Goths or Swedes, soldiers or allies, bought with gold, bribed to his side. My sword was better, and always his. My sword was better, and he didn't have to have mercenaries. And in every battle, my place was in front, alone. And so it shall be forever. And as long as this sword lasts and serves me in the future as it has served me before, so I killed Dagref the Frank, who brought death to Hilgeth and who looted his corpse. Hilgeth's necklace, Wethlow's treasure, never came to Dwarf's king. The thief fell in battle, but not by my blade. He was brave and strong, but I swept him in my arms, and I ground him against me until his bones broke, until his blood burst out. Remember, Beowulf, who's already proved his prowess in being strong, fighting Grendel and his Grendel's mother, doesn't sometimes need a sword to kill monsters and evil people, right? He uses his hands. And now I shall fight for this treasure, and I'm going to fight with both hand and sword. And so Beowulf uttered his final boast. Is this a boast? I've never known fear. As a youth, I fought in endless battles. I'm old now, but I will fight again. And I'm going to seek fame still. If the dragon hiding in his tower dares to face me. Then he said farewell to his followers, each in his turn for the last time. I'd use no sword, no weapon, if this beast could be killed without it, crushed to death like Grendel, gripped in my hands and torn limb from limb. But his breath will be burning. Hot poison will pour over from his tongue. I feel no shame with shield and sword and armor against this monster. You see, he considers it almost an honor, and almost a dishonor to use a sword and a shield, right? He's used to fighting people with his hands. But because this is a dragon with, hot poison breath, I feel no shame. I feel no shame using a shield and a sword. Let's talk about shame when we review this, can we, sometime? Shame. Very important. When he comes to me, I mean to stand, not run from his shooting flames. I'm going to stand till fate decides which of us should win. I'm going to stand till fate decides which of us to win. My heart is firm, my hands calm. I need no hot words. Wait for me close by, my friends. We'll see soon who will survive this bloody battle. Stand when the fighting is done. No one else could do what I mean to here. No man but me could hope to defeat this monster. No one could try. And this dragon's treasure, his gold, everything hidden in that tower will be mine. Or war will sweep me to a bitter death. So then Beowulf rose, still brave, still strong, and with his shield at his side and his mail shirt on his breast, he strode calmly, confidently toward the tower under the rocky cliffs. And no coward could have walked there. And then he who endured dozens of desperate battles, who stood boldly while swords and shields clashed, the best of kings, he saw the huge stone arches, and then he felt the heat of the dragon's breath flooding down through the hidden entrance. It was too hot for anyone to stand. A steaming of current of fire and smoke that blocked all passage. And then the geek's lord and leader, angry, he gets mad now, lowered his sword and roared a battle cry so loud, so clear, it reached through the hoary rock and it hung in the dragon's ear. The beast rose angry. So imagine a battle cry, right? Knowing a man had come, and then nothing but war could have followed. Its breath came first, a steaming cloud pouring from the stone, and then the earth itself shook, and Beowulf swung his shield into place, and he held it in front of him, facing the entrance. The dragon coiled and uncoiled, its heart urging it into battle. Beowulf's ancient sword was waiting, unsheathed, his sharp and gleaming blade, and the beast came closer. Both of them were ready, each set on slaughter. The Geat's great prince stood firm, unmoving, and he prepared behind his high shield. And waiting in his shining armor, the monster came quickly toward him, pouring out fire and smoke and hurrying to its fate. Flames beat at the iron shield, and for a time the shield held, protected Beowulf as he had planned. But then it began to melt, and for the first time in his life, that famous prince fought with fate against him. So this is, you got to remember this. This is the first time in his life that fate was against him. But he still fought. With glory denied him. There's no glory yet. He knew it, but he raised his sword and he struck at the dragon's scaly hide. But the ancient blade broke, bit into the monster's skin, drew blood, but then it cracked and failed him before it went deep enough. Helped him less than he needed. Oh, he broke his sword into the damn dragon. The dragon leaped with pain, thrashed, and beat at him, at Beowulf, spouting murderous flames, spreading them everywhere. And the geek's ring giver, Beowulf, did not boast of glorious victories in other wars. His weapon had failed him, deserted him. Now when he needed it most, that excellent sword. Ethgroth's famous son, Beowulf, stared at death. Stared at death. Hold on, I want to mark. Unwilling to leave this world to exchange it for a dwelling in some distant place, or take a journey into darkness that all men must wait, as death ends their few brief hours on earth. Quickly the dragon came at him, encouraged as Beowulf fell back, and its breath flared as he suffered, wrapped around in swirling flames, a king before, but now a beaten warrior. And none of his comrades came to him or helped him. His brave and noble followers, they ran for their lives. Remember, he's still fighting him outside the cave, right? They fled deep into the wood, but only one of them remained and stood there miserable, remembering as a good man must what kinship should mean. This is very important. They all leave except one, remembering what kinship means. His name was Wiglaf, and he was Wexton's son, and a good soldier. And his family had been Swedish once. So remember a little genealogy. Watching Beowulf, he could see how his king was suffering and burning. And remember everything his lord and cousin had given him, armor, gold, and the great estates Wexton's family enjoyed. Wiglaf's mind was made up. He raised his yellow shield and drew his sword, an ancient weapon that once belonged to Onelia's nephew. Remember Onelia was the Swedish one that was killed before? And that Wexton had won, killing the prince when he fled from Sweden, sought safety with head. See, these swords have genealogy. They have genealogy. Sought safety with Hedred and found death. And Wiglaf's father had carried the dead man's armor and his sword to Onelia. And then the king had said nothing and only given him the armor and the sword and all, and everything his rebel nephew had. And you're wondering, why are they telling me this when Beowulf is being encumbered in flames? And Wiglaf, it was about, he wants to go in and help his boss. Why are they telling me all this? You know why they're telling you all this. I told you why. Jimmy told you why. They're telling you this because this is a story that has to be remembered. It's not written down. I know this is an epic poem and it's written, but in those days it wasn't written. So they want you to remember what's going on, where Wiglaf came from, etc. Wexton had kept those shiny gifts and held them for years, waiting for his son to use them and wear them honorably and well as once his father had done. And then Wexton died, and Wiglaf was his heir, and he inherited the treasures and weapons and land. Now you know. He never wore that armor, fought with the sword, until Beowulf called him to his side and led him into war. But his soul did not melt, and his sword was strong, and the dragon discovered his courage and his weapon when the rush of battle brought them together. So now the dragon's facing another character, right? Wiglaf. So Wiglaf, his heart heavy. Why do you think his heart is heavy? He's showing courage, but it's heavy. He uttered the kind words his comrades deserve. I remember how we sat in the mead hall drinking and boasting of how brave we would be when Beowulf needed us. And he who gave us these swords and armor, all of us swore to repay him when the time came, kindness for kindness, with our lives if he needed them. Beowulf allowed us to join him and choose us from the great army, thinking that our boasting words had some weight. Believing our promises, trusting our swords, he took us for soldiers, for men, and he meant to kill this monster himself, our mighty king. Fight this battle alone, unaided, as in the days when his strength and daring dazzled men's eyes. But those days are gone and over. And now our Lord must lean on younger arms, and we must go to him while angry flames burn at his flesh. Help our glorious King. By Almighty God, I would rather burn myself than see flames swirling around my Lord. And who are we to carry home our shields before we've slain his enemy? And ours to run back to our homes with Beowulf so hard pressed here? I swear that nothing he ever did deserve an end like this, dying miserably and alone, butchered by this savage beast. Look we swore that these swords and armor were each of us all. And then Wiglaf ran to his king, crying encouragement as he dove through the dragon's deadly fumes. He dove through the dragon's deadly fumes. Beloved Beowulf, remember how you boasted once that nothing in the world would ever destroy your fame? Fight to keep it now. Be strong and brave, my noble king. protecting life and fame together. My sword will fight at your side. And the dragon heard him, and the man-hating monster, and he was angry, shining with surging flames. It came for Wiglaf, anxious to return his visit. Waves of fire swept at his shield, and the edges began to burn. His mail shirt couldn't help him. But before his hands dropped the blazing wood, Wiglaf jumped behind Beowulf's shield. His own was burned to ashes. And then the famous old hero, remembering the days of glory, he lifted what was left of Nagling. Now we know the name of the sword, his ancient sword. And he swung it. Remember, he had broken the sword on the monster, didn't get it all the way through, right? And he was in trouble, but he picked up what was left of it and swung it with all his strength, and he smashed the gray blade, gray meaning older blade, right, into the beast's head. But then Nagling broke into pieces, as iron always had in Beowulf's hands. He's so strong. His arms were too strong. Well, I just said that. The hardest blade could not help him, and the most wonderfully worked, he carried them to war, but fate had decreed that the Geats' great king would be no better for any weapon. This is unbelievable. I don't know if I could take it. Let's keep reading. Then the monster charged again, vomiting fire, wild with pain, and he rushed out fierce and dreadful, its fear forgotten. So now the dragon's losing. He got stabbed in the head. Now he's going crazy. And he drove his tusks. He waited for a chance and drove its tusks into Beowulf's neck. Beowulf staggered. The blood came flooding forth, and it fell like rain. And then, when Beowulf needed him most, Wiglaf showed his courage, his strength, his skill, and the boldness that he was born with. Ignoring the dragon's head, he helped his lord by striking lower down. The sword sank in to the dragon. His hands burned, but the shining blade had done its work. The dragon's belching flames began to flicker and die away. And Beowulf drew his battle-sharp dagger. The blood-stained old king still knew what he was doing. Quickly, he cut the beast in half. He slit it apart, and it fell. Their courage had killed it. Two noble cousins had joined in the dragon's death. Yet what they did, all men must do when the time comes. Yet what they did, all men must do when the time comes. Don't forget that. But the triumph was the last Beowulf would ever earn. The end of greatness and life together. The wound in his neck began to swell and grow, and he could feel something stirring, burning in his veins. A stinging venom. The damn dragon was poisonous, and he knew that the beast's fangs had left it. He fumbled along the wall. He found a slab of stone and dropped down. Above him he saw a huge stone, arches, and heavy posts, holding up the roof of that giant hall. And then Wiglaf's gentle hands bathed the blood-stained prince, his glorious lord, weary of war, and he loosened his helmet. Beowulf spoke, in spite of his swollen, livid wound, knowing that he'd unwound his string of days on earth, and he'd seen as much as God would grant him. All worldly pleasure gone, as life would go soon. I'd leave my armor to my son now if God had given me an heir, a child born of my body and his life created for mine. But he doesn't have a son. I've worn this crown for 50 winters, and no neighboring people have tried to threaten the geeks, sent soldiers against us, or talked of terror. My days have gone by as fate willed, waiting for its word to be spoken, ruling as well as I knew how, swearing no unholy oaths, and seeking no lying wars. I can leave this life happy. I can die here, knowing that the Lord of my life has never watched me wash my sword in blood born of my own family. Remember this. Beloved Wiglaf, go quickly, find the dragon's treasure. We've taken its life, but its gold is ours too. Hurry, bring me ancient silver, precious jewels, shining armor, and gems before I die. Death will be softer, leaving life in this people that I've ruled. So long, if I looked at last of all prizes. Chapter 38. Then Wexton's son went in as quickly as he could, that's Wiglaf, did as the dying Beowulf asked, and entered the inner darkness of the tower, and went with his mail shirt and his sword. Flushed with victory, he groped his way. The brave young warrior, and suddenly he saw the piles of gleaming gold, precious gems scattered on the floor. Cups, bracelets, rusty old helmets, beautifully made, but they were rotting with no hands to rub or polish them. And they lay where the dragon had left them, and it had flown in the darkness once before fighting its final battle. So gold can easily triumph and defeat the strongest men, no matter how deep it's hidden. There lay where the dragon left them. It had flown in the darkness once before fighting its final battle. So gold can, it is the dragon, so gold can easily triumph and defeat the strongest of men, no matter how deep the gold is hidden. Keep that in mind, very important. Let's mark it. Okay? And Wiglaf saw, hanging high above, a golden banner, woven by the best of weavers and beautiful. And over everything he saw a strange light, shining everywhere on the floors, the wall, the treasure. Nothing moved. There were no other monsters that appeared. So he took what he wanted, all the treasures that pleased his eye, heavy plates, golden cups, the glorious banner, and he loaded his arms with all that they could hold. Beowulf's dagger, his iron blade, had finished the fire-spitting terror that once protected the tower and treasures alike. Beowulf's dagger, remember he cut him in half? The gray bearded lord of the Geats had ended those flying, burning raids forever. Why is he saying this? We already know what happened. Remember, he's telling the story. He's telling the story. The narrator, the third-person narrator, is reciting the story. Beowulf's dagger, remember, he's reminding us. And then Wiglaf went back, anxious to return while Beowulf was alive, to bring him the treasure that they had won. And he ran, hoping that the wounded lord, weak and dying, had not left the world too soon. And then he brought the treasure to Beowulf. And he found his famous king bloody, gasping for breath. But Wiglaf sprinkled water over his lord until the words deep in his breast broke through and were heard. Beholding the treasure, he spoke. Hauntingly. I want to write that down. Hauntingly. Okay. For this gold, these jewels, I thank our Father in heaven, ruler of the earth. You know what that is, right? For all this that his grace has given me, allowed me to bring to my people while breath still came to my lips. I sold my life for this treasure, and I sold it well. Take what I leave, Wiglaf, and lead my people. Help them. My time is gone. And have the brave Geats build me a tomb, and when the funeral flames have burned me, and build it here at the water's edge, high on this spit of land, so that the sailors can see this tower and remember my name, and call it Beowulf's Tower, and boats in the darkness and mist crossing the sea will know it. Then the brave king gave the golden necklace from around his throat to Wiglaf, and gave him the gold-covered helmet and his rings and his mail shirt, and he ordered him to use them well. You are the last of our far-flung family. Fate has swept our race away, taken warriors and their strength, and led them to the death that was waiting. And now I follow them. The old man's mouth was silent, spoke no more, had said as much as it could. He found sleep in the fire soon. He would sleep in the fire soon, pardon me. His soul left his flesh and flew to glory. And then Wiglaf was left, a young warrior sadly watching his beloved king, seeing him stretched on the ground, left guarding a torn, bloody corpse. But Beowulf's killer was dead too, the coiled dragon, cut in half, cold, motionless. Men and their swords had swept it from the earth and left it lying in front of its tower, and had won its treasure when it fell crashing to the ground, cut it apart with their hammered blades and driven them deep in its belly. It would never fly through the night, glowing in the dark sky, glorying in its riches, burning and raiding. Two warriors had shown their strength and had slain it with their swords. Not many men, no matter how strong, and not matter how daring, how bold, had done as well, rushing at its venomous fangs, or even quietly entering its tower, intending to steal, but finding the treasure's guardian awake, watching and ready to greet them. But Beowulf had gotten its gold, bought it with blood. Dragon and king had ended each other's days on earth. This is Jimmy. You've been reading with Jimmy. This was part 7 of 8 parts. We're on the last part coming up. What a wonderful story of how he killed this dragon, isn't it? Isn't it? It's just so well written. I hope I did it justice reading it to you. Learn more by reading the last and final chapter with me, and be sure to visit and read other classics on this website. If you have any questions, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. Please email me. Love to hear with you. And remember, let's go back to my favorite line. I want to go back and I want you to read this line with me. Hold on. Where the hell is it? What they did, all men must do when the time comes. What they did, Wiglaf and Beowulf, all men and women must do when the time comes. And when is that time? And when does it come? When you face a dragon. And there's a lot of definitions of what a dragon is, as you'll see in the analysis. Thanks for reading. Email me.